We're live. Welcome to another episode of Live Lunch. This afternoon we are joined by the wonderful Stephen Dawson and Purity.
Good afternoon.
Hello.
And Matt Covs and myself.
Can I just say, I think we could probably stretch to buy another microphone. Yeah, it's so funny watching the two of you share one. Like, honestly, can we not buy another microphone?
I like to think of it as like seeing myself, us in like 1980s stadium rock band, where the guitarist and the lead singer come together and share a mic. It's like for effect. Like of course we could get another microphone, but actually we like this dynamic.
It's a bonding experience.
Do you know what the problem is?
What?
They don't make these gold microphones anymore.
Wow, that's such a shame.
Yeah.
No one makes any gold microphones at all.
They were like, it's so iconic, Live Lunch, that we're just not going to mass produce
They
it.
retired the microphone after we bought them. And you couldn't live with it if it was another colour microphone next to
That would
the...
just mess my cheek.
I'll come back next week and see how we've resolved this issue.
Stephen always wins.
If anyone has a gold microphone, I'd like to donate to the show. Like
Yeah.
that would solve everyone's problem.
Thank you. Anyway, so this Sunday we looked at the story of Jacob and Rachel and Leah. Stephen, you called it The Pursuit of Happiness. And across the next half hour, we're going to cover a range of topics that we touched upon in the passage. So we looked at open relationships and polygamy. We look about the sanctity of life and children. We're going to talk about the pursuit of happiness and why we call the sermon The Pursuit of Happiness and where we find our happiness amongst other things. But Stephen, do you want to kick us off by giving us a summary of the sermon?
And also, we've got food from Coco di Mama.
We do.
Italian food, nice pasta. Stephen's on a salad. Good boy.
Yes. Thank you to our wonderful producer Jess for organising this.
Woo-woo.
Lovely. Thank you, Jess.
So you asked me to give a quick summary?
Yes, please.
Yeah. So we're looking at the story of really the birth of Jacob's children. And so 11 of his sons and his daughter. His last son's not born until chapter 35, so come back for that as well. But you're looking at the birth of them, and as you look at them, you're looking at a tension right through the story between Rachel and Leah, kind of vying for Jacob's attention, kind of showing off their fertility, and they kind of, each child that gets born, they give the meaning by the name, and lots of about, I'm vindicated over my sister, or God has remembered me in this, or this and the other, and the way I go about it is not great. It's the dysfunction that we see right throughout Genesis just continues in this family, and I suggested to Johan to call it The Pursuit of Happiness. I was thinking that you would do something else, but that was great, because I think in one sense, Leah starts the marriage off in an unhappy place. She's there as kind of second-rate wife, and she's kind of thinking, how do I get happy in this as well? Maybe I can win my husband's affections by giving him children. And then Rachel, she's the pretty one, she's the chosen wife, but she's barren to start with. And again, so there's sadness in her life to the point where she wants to die. So how does she get happy again? Well, she's just seeking any way she can to get pregnant. So some superstitious rituals, using her servant girl, that kind of stuff. So I guess it's just the pursuit of it. And really, if you're pursuing happiness by externals, in this case, having children, actually it doesn't lead to happiness. There's just strife throughout it all. And so I guess I try to lead people to the place where actually happiness is a funny word to use, but I guess genuine joy and peace comes from seeking God first. That was the kind of thrust of it.
And maybe because I guess you're using that because that's a universal theme of we desire something, we desire happiness, satisfaction in life, and I guess it looks different in every generation. So I guess for Purity, how does that play out with your generation, younger people, the rest of us old people with grey beards and whatever, we're not as in touch with what that looks like, because every generation I think is different in terms of so we can call it happiness, but it looks, if it's like freedom, is it power, is it success, is it what do you encounter people talk about?
I think Stephen really quickly touched on a good point that I thought of, there's a difference between happiness and joy. We pursue happiness, but happiness doesn't last. Mm-hmm. There's a depth in joy that you just get in Jesus, whereas in happiness, things are temporary, things come and go. So I guess in my generation, it'd be what would it be? I guess right now everyone wants to be a social media influencer, some kind of easy job, or something that's super, I don't know, chill.
Isn't that what you wanted to do before?
I was just going to say calm starting.
You know what? I feel I'll say my generation, but it's actually very relatable to all the generations, not just mine, because they intertwine. But yeah, just the normal things of jobs, finances, friendships, I'd say, is a big one, especially like post-uni kind of times. Trying to figure out like making friends when you're an adult, like don't understand how that works. So if you have any thoughts on that, because you're not confined into like a lecture room together. I mean,
Such a great question.
yeah.
Right.
You do like lunch, man. That's how we become friends.
Exactly. You have
share
to
a microphone.
Yeah.
bring those boundaries back in. Get in the same room every week and just ground it out until you like each other.
Eat together.
Eat together is a good one.
And so a friendship will soon blossom, I'm sure, between me and Johan.
Yeah. One
Any
of these
moment
days.
now, we will be friends.
I think just the quick question on the back of that is does the pursuit of happiness
Just
go
want to
hand in
say
hand?
that is a really insightful thing from Unity. Getting friendships as you get older is more and more difficult.
Okay.
Your get shrinks and shrinks and shrinks. As a pastor, I have to address this all the time. People are like, they grow older in church and they think the church has become less friendly. So no, it's just a stage of life. So it's so easy to make friends when you're growing up. You know, you've got everything in common as a kid and that kind of stuff. And university, you're chucked in, you're having the time of your life. People throw out the other side of university, it's like, what's going on? Where's my friends? That kind of stuff. And then it's like, oh, how it's having children. That's a great thing to bond over. But then your children get older, and it stretches and moves and it changes, and people move apart, and it's difficult to keep going for friendships, particularly when people move on. I know this isn't where we're going to go, but just to say that is a real thing.
Fair.
And you're watching, that's for you. Let me say that is tough and it's difficult. It's something you have to work out.
So we
are taught to be friends and to bear with one another, know one another, and go for it.
We like to get really practical on the show. So if you were speaking to Purity and saying, okay, Purity, what would you say are your top tips to making friends as an adult?
Oh, great question. Pray.
Love that.
No, there's times in my life where I felt lonely, where I haven't got deep friendships, and I've just prayed, said, God, give me some people. And normally what happens is God opens my eyes to the fact I have actually got friends and people who do really care for me. And then the things make time. I find ways to make time with people and probably lower your bar slightly. Which is something really funny to say. I think, well, unless this person has the same interests, has this level of chemistry, that's what we think. But as Christians, the best thing we've got, we've got Christ in common. Mm-hmm. And beginning to know that, and giving time to those things, and giving time to other people, ask questions, don't go into it thinking, what can I get? If you go in thinking, I need this friend, you're needy, it's pretty unattractive. They're going to be someone's friend, go and love them. And so there's a few relationships I've had over the years where I've just kind of flipped it, thought, you know what, I am going to be a good friend. What results is actually I get friendship in return as well. So there's three things.
Oh, here's a question. We're going off on a tangent now, but that's okay. That's what it's here for. Does friendship have to be in person? Especially like a generational thing in terms of like, people say, well, my community's online. I connect with people online. I play computer games with people and we connect and... Yeah, but that's
a generational thing.
Is that?
Somebody watching it. What is a pen pal? Well, go on Wikipedia.
Did you have to do that? You probably didn't do that, didn't you? Did you? Secondary school, we had to write something in Germany or something like that.
We used to get letters from people.
Did you?
You said Germany with Will to stay there, just so you know.
No, but it's just another country that you've never been to. But it's like England because you did German and I don't know. Anyway, doesn't matter. In school, I've got
two friends need to be digital or in person.
Keep us back on track.
Right? Yeah. Me. Hi.
Go for it, Piercy.
I feel like you can make great bonding experiences from digital. Like, we have a social media age where you can make friends with people who are the other side of the world. But I guess it's similar to the local church. Bring this back, where you do need people who are a stone's throw away to help you in those situations. There's something about like actually being within a meter's contact to have that depth of help, I guess, that is needed in friendships that you can't get in online. But it doesn't mean to negate that you can't have friendships, real friends, or at least I don't think.
Yeah, no, I'd agree. I think you definitely can be friends online.
Yeah.
Can you be church online? I think it's where that's bleeding into. No, I don't think you can, because how can you need to be able to break bread in person together, that kind of stuff. I think there's things in the, online is still a certain category of friendship in terms of what you reveal and that kind of stuff, and not that you can't go deep, but it's when you're in person actually you're much more likely to have to forgive one another, for example. How can you do that? Online friendships you're less likely. Maybe I don't know, but I think there's something, isn't it, about being in person that's different in terms of actually church family. But I think friendship, I think you definitely can do it online. Yeah, that's my thought. I think definitely there.
Because during lockdown, we'd have dinner dates with friends we hadn't seen for years or who were not in the same city, But once we've come out of lockdown and the pandemic, I've not done a Zoom call, even like a Zoom meeting in months.
So
like,
when you say dinner date, you'd actually
we'd get some food.
you sit on your sofa with
Yeah.
your dinner, and
Yeah.
they would be on the Zoom call having their dinner,
Yeah, and we just chat.
and you'd chat.
Yeah.
We did it a couple of times where we had the same ingredients and cooked together.
Wow.
Did you?
And so I need to, yeah, fun.
Gosh, remember
Yeah.
lockdown?
It's so fascinating. 'Cause, like, we did have some good moments. I've just not done it since then. I've enjoyed eating with people in person.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry.
But something so I speak to my dad like way more now than I ever had done, because we started having a weekly Zoom call, and we just continued that on. I've tried to suggest we stop, but locked into it now. Do we have to continue? Everyone called to continue this? Oh yeah. Oh, okay, you are. Okay. Yeah. Oh yeah. We'll keep going. Keep going.
Should we jump into the text?
We can do, yeah. Or we could just talk about my dad, but no, it's not that.
Was your dad at church the other Sunday?
Yeah, a few weeks
When you
ago.
were preaching?
Yeah, it was.
Oh, that's really cool.
Well, he comes to visit me occasionally, yeah.
Oh.
The Zoom's not quite enough, so he
Well,
comes.
my dad's like hundreds of miles away, so I don't get to see my dad. But it was really nice to see your dad watching you preach.
Ah, thanks, mate.
Anyway, sorry.
This might...
He didn't recognize me from live lunch, so.
Well, I can talk about it because I know he's not going to watch this, so.
Well, I guess one of the big things that we encounter in this passage is one man married to two women. So polygamy. Four women. Yes, you're right. Polygamy, does God allow it? But also increasingly open relationships and polygamous open relationships are becoming more and more popular today. What would you say?
Polyamorous. What do you think of that?
Polyamorous relationships, yeah. Because you can't legally get married to more than one person, right? It's still illegal.
In the UK.
Yeah. And so how would you what would you say about that?
What would you say about that? That's a big open-ended question for an open relationships conversation.
Well, I think there's two questions. Is because it's in the Bible. Is God okay about polygamous relationships? That's a good question, isn't it? Purity. What do you think about that?
Is God
Do you want
okay?
more than one husband in your life?
No, I think one would be one relationship's all right. But I think, what does God say? Well, I mean, you've got the biblical text on like family, and like what we say in, especially going through this series, is we see a lot of mistakes that people make, and just because it's in the Bible isn't necessarily the prescription of it. It's this is what people did, and this is how humans are, and
Exactly.
it reflects the society that we're in now. It's still how people are, and it's still what people do.
Yeah.
So it's great that it's still in, that it still is relevant now, basically.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not God's design of like marriage and family. It would be with one of them. But I think Jacob's choice would have been Rachel, but you know, we're here where we are. And there's a wisdom in that, in having one partner. And that I think currently we're kind of thinking like, or even then, having more people in a situation, it's like, why wouldn't you do that? Because it's like more children, and that's maybe what they were looking towards is all of this. But we see that it doesn't necessarily lead to it leads to a lot of harm as well that could have been dealt with differently, basically. Yeah. I think I've like skated around the question because I can't remember what the
it's good.
question
No,
was.
so yeah, I think I mentioned in my sermon that it's descriptive. It's describing the actions of various people, and invariably those actions lead to bad consequences. So the Bible doesn't shy away from that. Well, yeah, they've done that, but this is how they all played out. You know, there's rivalry, particularly between these wives in this passage. I think bizarrely the polygamous relationships pre the law given to Moses are kind of easier to justify because God's just not prescribed yet what it should be, although Adam and Eve he set up, that was his kind of model, but it's not quite the same. But after that it's a bit weird when things like King David has hundreds of wives and concubines and everything else. You're thinking what is going on here, because they've got the Bible. You could see that is not God's best design, and again there's reasons for that, and also again it does not play out well in reality.
I think as well, like to broaden it to what's going on and around us right now, it's like we shouldn't be surprised that polygamy comes back into the equation of what happens in a society like in our country right now. So it seems to be increasingly, it's probably still a very small minority of people, but it's gonna, you see articles and maybe know people that are in open relationships or and we should expect that. I think as Christians, looking at our culture and looking at what is happening, when you move away from a society that has, as it has been in the last sort of century, shaped by Christian values, the more you move away from that and the more it's about individual freedom. Purity, you were talking about a minute ago. When individual freedom is the primary thing, the way that people live and what people think about, you're going to get all sorts of different types of relationships and all sorts of different definitions. Because basically what our culture is saying now, people are free to define themselves and define their relationships in any way you want. Like, people see the boundaries as traditional restrictions and actually suppressing of people, but and what is happening in many ways to do with self-expression and types of relationships over the last 50 years, is that things that have started as on the fringe, like even like 50 years ago, even someone to live with someone for a long time and not be married would probably say that's a bit weird. But that's changed, but no one would think that now. But that's what happened. Things are start on the fringe, and then it's like becomes more acceptable. It's like, okay, if that's what makes you happy, then do it. Like, why would you not do it if it makes you happy? Because that's the thing we put at the top, and soon it'll be, what you just said there. It's not legal. That's going to come around the corner. Like, people want to defend the rights to have whatever. Like, if everyone's in agreement of their relationship, why can't they get married to more than one person? It's just exactly what's happened with other types of marriages that have come in the last decade or so. It's like, what right do you have to define it your way? Why can't anyone define it the way ever they want to define it? And so it's only going to get more complicated. And as you say, it's like it's crazy how Genesis reflects it. It's like Genesis just shows when God is not in the equation and people just do whatever they want, they will do whatever they want to get every single, and that's what Genesis is like. And the whole story of it is like God trying to bring back his purposes through one family. It's like, no, come and do it right, this is how it is supposed to be, but they still don't get it right. But yeah, anyway, that's a little rant on that.
It comes down to, we've been reading individually the Dune books, and very much marriage in the Dune books is a matter of convenience and political alliance. And so even in this story, the purpose, even Rachel and Leah offering their servants to Jacob to bear more sons and to bear more children in order to achieve the person's love. So we can see marriage suddenly becomes more of a matter of, I don't know, it could either be a matter of convenience or it could be a matter of self-expression. But what would be the right, I guess, view of marriage if it's not those two?
Sorry, what do you mean?
So, like, why go into a marriage?
Yeah.
Kind of thing, because they were going into it for, like, Rachel and Leah were bringing their servant wives so that they could have more kids.
Yeah.
But is that necessarily the right reason to go into a marriage? Kind of thing. Which I'm not married, so I don't know.
I don't know how to answer this, but one of the things that comes into like when we marry people in our church, one of the things that's often, I think always, comes into the service, at least a little bit, is the sense in which that marriage is not just good for the individual, but it's good for society. And I think that's right and good. And I think often when we look at the Bible, and you talked about Adam and Eve and the beginnings and how God intended it to be, we're almost instinctively thinking that as sort of on an individual basis, it was good for Adam and for Eve that they were exclusive in their relationship with one another. But God, and that marriage is a blessing to the individual, but it's also the way that God has intended it, because he's seeing the society that springs from them. And so, having a marriage is, we would teach and believe in this church that it's going to be good for you. It brings stability and a partnership and friendship for a lifetime. That is a good thing. That will be a blessing to you. And therefore we should invest in it and take it seriously and not be passive in our marriages. but also it's going to be good for others. Like, it's good for you if you have children. It'd be good. That is, we unashamedly we say that is the best environment for children to be raised, where they have a mother and a father. That's the way. Now, not every family is like that, and that's not condemning families that are not and saying, well, that's just. But it's saying there is a blessing in that, and I think so. You only need to see what's happening now, where we have fragmented families, and just the pain that causes, not just for those individuals, although it does, but for their children, and the impacts of that over decades of children not being raised with a mother and a father, and not having instability in home life and that sort of thing. There's a great cost to that God wants us to recognize. Anyway, I don't know if that answers the question, but it's almost like we shouldn't just think about marriage as an individual. Is it good for me or is it not good for me? Even I would encourage people who are in our church who are not married to see marriage as a good thing that blesses our church, blesses our society, for many different reasons.
Anything you want to add to that?
That's good.
Let's talk a little bit about one of the things you did mention, Stephen, in your message is abortion. We're obviously talking about children being born, and I guess their preciousness to God, and that was kind of the reason that you're bringing up, really, as a sort of reminder of that God so cares about children. I think that's particularly relevant this week when it's the topic is on our news feeds and from the changes that's happened to the law in America. Not directly relevant here because nothing legal is going to change over here, but even Glastonbury Festival at the weekend, Kendrick Lamar on stage strangely seems to be presenting himself as Christ or a Christ-like figure with the way he's dressing himself, but at the same time making a fairly obvious pro-choice stance with that. Now, I guess for Christians, and people in our church perhaps thinking, oh, Kendrick Lamar, he's a Christian, isn't he? Or he would say he is. And then, Stephen, you've just said abortion is wrong. Like, is it more nuanced? Like, why would you even say that? Because that just to say it quite straightly, abortion is not right. God loves the unborn. Would probably be something. Well, it is very controversial to say. Like, why would you even say that? Where does that come from? Yeah. Tell us a bit more about that. Great.
So here at Emmanuel, unashamedly, we believe that Jesus leads us in every area of our lives. And he does that by through his word, through the Bible. As we look at the Bible, it's very clear that people are made in his image. There is, every life is sacred and to be guarded. And we see that explicitly stated in verses. We also just see it in the narrative, in terms of God's grief when people aren't treated in that way. And we're going to find that in some other more crazy stories. We go through Genesis and other places. We see it in the way that Jesus treats people, actually values kids. He values women, which have been very countercultural in his day. So their version of abortion, infanticide, would be a big thing back then. If a daughter's born, just go and put it out in the woods or kill it. It's sons that are after. There'd be a massive disparity in gender gap because the convenience around the actual children you want, or children who are disabled, would be cast away. And so very, very quickly, you see down through history, the church and Christians have stood in the gap and taken care of the children that other people don't want. And for us in our day, in one sense, we don't get not much of an opportunity to do that because children that people don't want, they just discard. They just discard before they even come out of the womb. Also, see from Scripture very clearly that people are people from conception, and God's there in the Holy Spirit and that kind of stuff. And so we're saying actually right from day one, these people, these babies are precious to God. And so therefore, any step towards expressing that more clearly is good. And so something like the repeal in the law in America, it should be, I would say, as a Christian, something we should be celebrated. Now, there is difficulties when a national law says something, when everyone in that nation doesn't match up with it. How do you deal with that? And it's funny, the things I've not had to really navigate. I think I've held a view that I think abortion should be outlawed, but it does ask the question, okay, but then what about those who still want to? And the suddenly backstreet abortions and all those kinds of things. Those are things that really do need to be thought through. And also, it's an opportunity for the church to really think, okay, well, how do we support people who are suddenly in the place of crisis pregnancy? Yeah. People who are suddenly find themselves pregnant. How do we express love and grace? Because that's what Christians did. When it was infanticide, it was like, don't just do it. They were the part of the solution. Okay, well, we'll take them in. We'll have them. And so it's been really heartening to see some churches that I follow, I guess, on Twitter, online, saying their response is, yes, we're celebrating this, and if you are in pregnancy crisis, we will help you. We will help you with your children, whether it's financial, whether we can love them, we can care for them, we can adopt them. You know, if that's what's needed, then that should be the response of the church. We love people. We're not here to point fingers at those who want an abortion and that kind of stuff, or had an abortion and make them sure as people in our church that'll be the case. Actually, there's love, there's grace, there's forgiveness, there's help, there's counselling, all those kinds of things. And that should be the response of the church in that way. And we do need to, I guess, we'll be those who maybe have the opportunity to look at ourselves maybe at some point. I was going to say something else. Yeah.
No, that's great. Purity, it's tricky though, isn't it?
Oh, no, I know what I was going to say. God, that's what I was going to say. And I just want to say, there's not a caricature of the kind of people who are in crisis pregnancy. If me and my wife were pregnant today, that would be a crisis for me. You know, and I can totally empathise with people. You know, most abortions are not some teenage girl who's got knocked up somewhere. That's not the case. You know, it's the right across society. Having children is an inconvenience. It is a cost. It is difficult. It definitely would be right now for us for all kinds of reasons. You know, my wife's a bit older. Financially, it would be difficult. We've got enough people in our house already. That would just be tough. You know, I would not want a child right now. But our conviction, you know, because this comes from, you know, not like should we have children or not. It comes from our other conversation. Actually, why do we get married? Well, part of the marriage is to create a safe space for children to come into. And so the very fact that it's not just that our children are disposable, our sex lives are disposable, our relationships are disposable. And that's why abortion is it's so endemic in a sense. It's such a part of things, because we didn't start from day one with the fact that actually it should be one man, one woman, creating family together, a safe space for that. It's less crisis in that sense. And so it's not surprised that all the things that play out of that. So yeah.
No, I was just going to say, what's your reflection on it, Purity, from, I guess, you know, social media all around, people are talking about this topic, and from like as a Christian, it's not easy to know how to navigate that in terms of yeah,
that's true. I think starting off with just knowing that it's not an easy thing to navigate, and being able to have these conversations, because it can be quite easy to get into like a whole anxious, like what to say, what to do, how to exist in this space when there are so many voices going on. And I think I haven't seen a lot, I don't know a lot about the topic, but I've seen a lot of responses. And so I think going into what Jesus would do is like be there for the response, be there for the person, be there for how society's taking this at the moment. Is there's a lot of emotional backlash. And from what my heart breaks, because it kind of feels from what I've seen from the response is like quite this is all kind of a stereotype of what Christians are doing, like being oppressive, and this is who God is, like religious and restrictive and all of this stuff. I'm like, that's not the God I know, and that's not the God I love. It's one who's a father who cares for relationships and cares for each person, wants to minister, like you're saying, to each person, whether they're in that place at the moment or have been in the past. It's like there is so much more to the conversation and to God that we are kind of missing out at the moment. So I think it's trying to come back to, in a situation where there's so many voices, it's coming back to God's voice, coming back to his word, coming back to the voice of what to do, is like praying first and seeking to understand and seeking to love first and pass no judgment, like Stephen's saying. So it's a crazy time basically, but God's in the midst of it and God's controlling it.
Yeah, I realised just, you know, touching on this topic at the end of our show today is going to be having lots of different reactions, and I guess we just want to sort of say that we're very open and encourage. We're trying to have this conversation so that we can show that we want to talk about it and we want to talk it through, and that's not just on a hypothetical level but at a real level as well. And you know, both Steve and I and pastoral ministry are meeting with people in all different types of scenarios, and you know, whether you're a church member listening to this or you're not and want to talk about it or ask questions or say well, we're wrong, or say I'm in a crisis situation now, I want some help and support, please get in touch with us. That's good. Should we draw things to go together for today?
What can we look forward to next week?
Next week, well, it feels like next week Jacob finally gets his act together. in a way, Jacob is not a great guy, and we've been looking at that for a number of weeks. But next week we talk about how he decides to go home, to take his family, his now incredibly large family, and go home. And he, at that moment, also starts to recognize more that God is with him, and he starts recognizing God in his life a lot more. And so it's a message about, taking responsibility for our lives, and also how God takes responsibility for us.
Brilliant. Thanks so much for joining us. As Matt said, if this episode has resulted in more questions or just anything you want to talk, please get in touch. We'd love to connect with you. If not, see you next week.
Bye-bye.